I'm the Reverend Anthony Johnson, and I invite you into worship with these words of the Vietnamese Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh. Enlightenment is always there. Small enlightenment will bring great enlightenment. If you breathe in and are aware that you are alive, then you can touch the miracle of being alive. Then that is a kind of enlightenment. Although we cannot meet in the church building due to the need for physical distancing, there are many programs to strengthen and serve members and friends of the church. Every Sunday when we are not in the building, there is a live virtual coffee hour following the service from 11:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. Please read news you can use and other emails you receive from the church, and please check the website regularly for updates. Please note the times when the minister is available via Zoom for check-in and talk. Please send your joy or sorrow via the link in the email you received and indicate whether you give permission for it to be read in next Sunday's service. Whoever you are, wherever you live, whomever you love, whatever you do for a living, you are welcome at the Unitarian Church of Harrisburg. I invite those of you at home to light a chalice, a candle, or whatever you choose to serve as your chalice at home. We light the chalice as a light to guide our going and coming and our staying safe in place. As a symbol of the warmth of welcome, as a flame to light up the world beyond that we already know, as a light of hope in these dark times, and as a hearth around which we gather as a community. Please join in the reading of the unison affirmation.
Love is the spirit of this congregation, and service is our gift. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to speak our truths in love, and to help one another.
Please join us in singing together, "Come, Come, Whoever You Are."
Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worship, lover of leading, ours is no peril and no despair. Come, gather on. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, whoever you are, come,
Good morning. I hope everyone watching is well on this Sunday morning. And as I was thinking about this Sunday morning, I realized that this is the 6th time we are doing a virtual Sunday service, which means that it has been 7 weeks since we've actually been together in person. And I can't believe that it has taken me 6 recordings to realize that I have never once introduced myself in any of the previous services. I take it for granted that everybody might know who I am who's watching these services. So for those of you who do not know me, I am Amy Firestein, the current UCH Religious Education Committee Chair and current RE Coordinator. This Sunday's service is about lessons from Buddhism. So this morning I am going to read you a story called The Brave Little Parrot. Story by Raffi Martin, illustrations by Susan Gaber. Once, a little parrot lived in a green forest. One day, dark clouds gathered, lightning flashed, thunder crashed, and a dead tree, struck by lightning, burst into flames. The wind began to blow, and soon bright sparks were leaping from tree to tree. "Fire!" called the little parrot, smelling the smoke. "Fire! Run to the river!" Then, flapping her wings, she flew swiftly toward the safety of the river's shore. After all, she was a bird and could fly away. But as she flew, she saw below her many of the forest's green trees writhed in flames. She saw that many animals were trapped by the fire, with no way to escape. Suddenly, a desperate idea, a way to save them, came to her. Darting to the river, she called to the animals already gathered safely there. "Elephants, please fill your trunks with water to spray on the flames. The rest of us can dip our bodies in the river. We can carry water in cupped leaves, too. Let's work together to save the forest and our friends." But the animals huddling on the shore moaned. "There's nothing anyone can do now, little parrot. It's too late." "It's true," coughed the cheetah. "Fast as I am, the flames are faster." "And powerful as we are," trumpeted the elephants, "we can't charge through flames." "It's hopeless," all the animals agreed. But the little parrot saw a way. After soaking her feathers in the cool water and filling a cup leaf, she flew back over the burning forest. Flames leapt at her, fierce heat struck, and thick smoke coiled. Walls of fire shot up now on one side, now on the other, but twisting and turning through the mad maze of fire, the little parrot flew bravely on. At last, over the heart of the burning forest, the little parrot shook her wings. The few drops of water that still clung to her feathers tumbled like jewels down into the flames. She poured the little bit of water from her leaf cup. The drops vanished instantly with a hiss. Then the little parrot flew back to the river. Once more, she dipped her body and wings in the cool water and filled another leaf cup. "Stay with us, little parrot," pleaded the gentle deer. "Don't go back into the fire." "Yes, stay," roared the mighty tiger. "A few drops of water can't save a burning forest." "It's too late," cried all the animals. "Be safe here with us." "But it might be possible," panted the little parrot. "So I'll try." And once again she flew over the burning forest, shook her wings, and let those few glittering drops of water fall. Hiss! Back and forth the little parrot flew, from the river to the forest, from the forest to the river. Her eyes burned red as coals. Her feathers were charred. Her claws cracked. She coughed and choked. But still the little parrot flew on. Now, at this time, some carefree goddesses and gods happened to drift by overhead. They were laughing and talking in their palace of sunlit clouds. They were eating honeyed foods and sipping sweet wines. One of the gods happened to notice the little parrot flying far below. "Look," he called. "Just look at that foolish bird trying to put out a forest fire with a few sprinkles of water." "Ridiculous," snorted one. "Impossible," laughed another. "Can't she see it won't work?" exclaimed the first god. And putting down his golden bowl and silver cup, the god took on the shape of a golden eagle. Flapping his broad wings once, twice, 3 times, he dove down, down, down toward the little parrot. As the little parrot flew on towards the forest's fiery heart, the eagle appeared by her side. "Go back, little bird," he said in a majestic voice. "A few drops of water can't save a forest. Stop now and save yourself before it is too late." But the parrot didn't turn back. "Great eagle," she coughed, "time is running out, so I don't need advice. I just need help." And she flew on. The great eagle was amazed. For each instant, the heat grew fiercer. He flapped his wings and rose up into the cooler air above. Far below him now, he saw the little parrot flying bravely on. Just above him, the gods and goddesses were laughing and talking, eating and drinking, and the forest continued to burn. Then, for the first time in all his endless life, that god felt ashamed. "We are gods, after all," he exclaimed. "We should do something." And all at once, the great eagle began to weep. Tears fell from his eyes, fell in torrents, sheet after sheet, like cooling rain upon the fire, upon the forest, upon the animals, and upon the little parrot. And what was this? Wherever those tears fell, the flames went out. Glistening tears dripped from branches and soaked into the scorched earth. The forest became quiet and still. Then, wherever those tears touched, new life burst forth. Green grass pushed up from among still glowing cinders. Blossoms opened, and leaves unfurled. New feathers now grew on the little parrot. Feathers red as flame, green as leaves, yellow as sunlight, and blue as the river. Such perfect colors, such a pretty bird. "The fire is out," called the little parrot in her joy. "Look, the danger is past." The animals looked at one another in amazement. Washed by those tears, they were whole and well. Not one was harmed. "Hooray!" cried the animals. "Hooray for the brave little parrot and the miraculous rain." Overhead in the clear blue sky, their friend, the little parrot, was looping and soaring in delight. She had done all she could, and somehow it had saved them all. I thought the story had a really good lesson, especially with all that is going on in our world today. It seems like a fire has been ripping through the world, and it has caused many of our own parrots to step up and jump in and be brave and help fight that fire, so it will once again be safe for us to go out into our communities to be together once more. It's a story about vision and courage that I hope we all take to heart. Be safe out there, and don't be afraid to fly and spread a sprinkle of water to help put out the flames as you are able and willing to do so.
Please join me in singing the Buddhist mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum, which actually means, all hail the jewel inside the lotus. And inside the lotus means that's your highest self. So we're singing about all hail to the jewel in our highest self. And it goes like this, and please join me. Om Mani
When I was in my early 20s, my high school chorus director invited me to go on an all expenses paid concert tour with the high school show choir, playing drums of course, of Austria and Romania. And the reason is because Chernobyl, the nuclear power plant at Chernobyl, had just exploded. And there were all these news reports about radioactive vegetables and fruits and all that sort of thing. And the drummer, the high school drummer who was supposed to go on this tour, his family decided they didn't want him exposed to that. So this show choir, which had been planning this trip for some time, asked me to sort of come out of retirement, come back to high school to play drums for them on this trip, which was a great opportunity. And of course I said yes. That's background. We get to Vienna, and I have an unbelievable crush on our tour guide for the Austria part of the tour. And she took us, the whole group, to an amusement park, sort of like Hershey Park. And one of the things that the group did was we all went in this hall of mirrors. And I had not been in a hall of mirrors before. And if you haven't, it's essentially all these triangular walls made of either glass or mirror that have sort of internal reflections, and it's very, very confusing. And most of the group went through this hall of mirrors kind of laughing and bumping into walls and that sort of thing, and then they got out and they were fine. Well, I did not get out. I was stuck in the middle of this hall of mirrors, and I could see the rest of my group right over there, not 15 feet away, and they were all kind of laughing at me in my intense frustration, just trying to figure out. And it seemed like whichever way I went, I hit a dead end. And I was very frustrated. It was humiliating and emasculating. And there she is, the tour guide that I want to impress so badly, right over there, kind of laughing at me because I couldn't figure out the simple thing that they had all just gone through. Well, after a while, of course, I realized that my frustration and exasperation were not helping me. So I calmed down, I took a few deep breaths, and I realized that I could tell what was mirror and what was glass, and I managed to work my way out. And they were very gracious in, welcoming me back into the group, and we went on and did the next thing. But the frustration was really memorable for me. Obviously, I still remember it many years later. And I think it relates to this morning's sermon topic because my frustration and impatience and resentment about it were not helping me. They were leading to what Buddha called suffering. And the way out of that, or at least a way out of that, was to slow down, be mindful, pay closer attention to the walls that were blocking me, and that helped get me through. It was a kind of enlightenment. So that's my reflection. Get it? Hall of Mirrors? Reflection for this morning. Thanks for listening.
As we enter into a time of meditation guided by the singing bowl, I ask you to open your hearts to the joys or concerns you hear from members of the congregation. J.D. and Ann Stillwater joyfully report that their daughter Robin is slowly improving and plans to be back at work on Monday. Ashley tells us, "My 13-year-old daughter has a growth pushing on her optic nerve. It is not able to be biopsied due to its precarious location. We are waiting for an appointment at the appropriate institution. Please send love and light to our family at this time." And I have a sorrow to share. Ursel Henry, a friend of Jody's and mine at the Community Church of New York, died on Friday from COVID-19. With open hearts, we enter into a time of meditation. Many religious liberals have an interest in Buddhism. Unitarian Universalism, my brand of religious liberalism, draws on many faith and spiritual traditions. I have seen Buddhism in many congregations. Today, I draw on 3 resources that I find both attractive and provocative of spiritual and ethical reflection. One is Stories from the Lotus Sutra by Gene Reeves, a Unitarian Universalist minister and theologian who is also a Buddhist teacher. I also draw upon his translation of the Lotus Sutra. The third source is Thich Nhat Hanh's book, Living Buddha, Living Christ. Thich Nhat Hanh is a Buddhist monk from Vietnam who spent many years in the West, only recently returning to his original monastery in Vietnam in anticipation of his death, since he is now in his 90s. One of his associates for many years was Father Daniel Berrigan. The two men shared a deep interest in and respect for the other's faith, as well as a deep commitment to peace and justice. But let us start with something a little magical, a story from the Lotus Sutra. The Lotus Sutra is a text of 28 chapters composed over several centuries. They recount the teaching of Shakyamuni, the name used for the Buddha after his enlightenment. It is set at Holy Eagle Peak in the northeastern part of modern India. It is here that the historical Buddha retreated for meditation and to teach. In this story, Shakyamuni answers questions and teaches his followers, which include many bodhisattvas, beings who remain in the last stage before Buddhahood in order to continue to teach in the world. There are even Buddhas listening. Beings arise from the ground and the sea and travel from other universes. This gathering is called the Dharma Flower Assembly. Gathered to hear him speak were, and here I quote, 12,000 monks, nuns, lay devotees, kings, arhats, 80,000 bodhisattvas, gods, god kings, dragon kings, Ashura kings, griffin kings, Shimera kings, centaur kings, and many kinds of fantastic supernatural beings. Many others would join them before the conclusion of the teaching. After the Buddha emitted a ray of light from his brow, 18,000 worlds became visible to those who were gathered. The sutra, Reeves reminds us, is not a factual narrative, but an invitation, quote, to enter into a world that is very different from our ordinary world, a world of stories. Now, these stories do several things. First of all, they convey teachings of the Buddha through metaphor. They invite the reader, or in the centuries that these stories circulated before there were written texts, the hearer, into a world outside the everyday world. Here is part of one of the stories that is the Lotus Sutra. There is a rich man who lives in a very run-down house with a single narrow gate. This man has many children. The children are playing inside when the house catches on fire. The father calls to them to flee the flames, but they are too busy playing either to fear the flames or follow their father's commands. He knows he cannot himself drag them out, so instead he calls on them, saying that if they go outside the gate, they will find 3 carriages drawn by goats, deer, and oxen that will be theirs to play with. Now, the children have always wanted such carriages, so they run out of the house and through the gate, where they ask their father for the carriages. But he gives them something better, a single, large, and fancy carriage drawn by a great white ox. This carriage is even better than what they expected, and they are happy, and of course, they are safe from the fire. This parable is offered as an example of teaching by skillful means. The fire represents the pains of existence, birth, old age, grief, sorrow, suffering, and so on. In getting the children to run out of the burning house, the father guides them into following one of 3 paths of knowledge: the ways of Shravaka, Pratyekabuddha, and Bodhisattva, all paths towards Buddhahood. But the one fancy carriage drawn by the great white ox represents the one Buddha vehicle, the path by which one becomes a bodhisattva. And a bodhisattva is the final stage before becoming a Buddha. Gene Reeves uses this passage and others to explain that the teachings of the Lotus Sutra are meant to be accessible to all people at all times. And this is the second thing the stories do. They affirm that all beings are capable of enlightenment. It is a kind of Buddhist universalism. There's even a female bodhisattva, Kim Yan, and she becomes a Buddha. Both monks and nuns are important in Buddhism, and modern interpretations make for a gender-inclusive sangha, or community of followers. One lesson from Buddhism is this: even in magical stories, embedded in a pre-modern worldview, there are real possibilities for gender inclusion and social justice. In recent years, I have been learning about engaged Buddhism, which is not limited to devotees of one Buddhist text or school or another. Engaged Buddhists may or may not be monks. Thich Nhat Hanh was the first teacher to speak of engaged Buddhism. As I said, he's a Vietnamese Buddhist monk, now 92 years old. Because of his peace activities, he has spent much of his life outside of Vietnam, most of it in France. Following Vietnam's unification in 1975, he was allowed to return to his homeland, but only in 2005. It took that long. He did not go there to live again until 2018, where he is living out his days at the monastery where he became a monk many decades earlier. In his book, Living Buddha, Living Christ, Thich Nhat Hanh asserts that, as is the case with Jesus, we can discern historical facts beneath the legends and elaborations of the life of Gautama, the historical Buddha. The Buddha, he writes, was a human being who was awakened and thereby no longer bound by the many afflictions of life. But when some Buddhists say they believe in the Buddha, they are expressing their faith in the wonderful universal Buddha, not in the teaching or life of the historical Buddha. They believe in the Buddha's magnificence and feel that this is enough. But the examples of the actual lives of the Buddha and Jesus are most important because, as any human beings, they lived in ways we can live too. Gautama, that was his given name, was born a prince. He would become the historical Buddha, the designation for the founding teacher of the path we now know as Buddhism. Raised in power and wealth by parents who sought to shield him from the suffering of the world or even knowledge of suffering, he nonetheless sees it when he is away from the palace. He leaves the palace to live elsewhere and meditates for 40 days and nights under the shelter of a banyan or Bodhi tree. He is, as Thich Nhat Hanh puts it, awakened and thereby no longer bound by the many afflictions of life. This upbringing and this unbinding give rise to the legends in the Lotus Sutra and other texts. But in writing about Buddha and Jesus, Thich Nhat Hanh reminds us that the actual lives of the Buddha and Jesus are most important because, as any human beings, they lived in ways that we can live too. Gautama renounced his titles and the wealth of his royal birth for the life of meditation and poverty. As the Buddha, he taught that there were many paths to enlightenment. He founded the Sangha, the community of monks. Today, Sangha has a broader meaning of a community of practitioners, some of whom live lives in monasteries, and some of whom are working in worldly occupations. In Gautama's time, Maleness was an assumption of enlightenment. Yet Gautama's own mother became a nun in the practice. By the time the Lotus Sutra was codified, there were already recognitions of at least one female bodhisattva. Kuan Yin is a bodhisattva of compassion and action. In chapter 12 of the Lotus Sutra, Shakyamuni recognizes this 8-year-old girl as among the wisest of teachers, and she passes through the stages of bodhisattva to Buddhahood in the presence of the Dharma flower assembly. Nhat Hanh reminds his readers of the teaching that the Buddha is a door to enlightenment. The teachings of Dharma is the teaching of many ways or doors. Writes Thich Nhat Hanh, but it is said that there are 84,000 Dharma doors, doors of teaching. If you're lucky enough to find a door, it would not be very Buddhist of you to say that yours is the only door. In fact, we have to open more doors for future generations. Society is changing. People are changing. Economic and political conditions are not the same as they were in the time of Buddha or Jesus. The Buddha relies on us for the Dharma to continue to develop as a living organism, not a stale Dharma, but a real Dharmakaya, body of teaching. To live this way is to grasp the Buddhist concept of non-attachment. In terms of how we live, Buddhism calls us to live without attachment either to self, a strong Western concept, or not self, its opposite, but not an Eastern ideal. He writes, there is something more important than non-self. It is the freedom from the notions of both self and non-self. For a Buddhist to be attached to any doctrine, even a Buddhist one, is to betray the Buddha. Finally, the stories tell us that the practice is ultimately nothing more or less than mindfulness. Be present now is the final lesson. Here is one last quotation from Thich Nhat Hanh's book. When the Buddha was asked, "Sir, what do you and your monks practice?" he replied, "We sit, we walk, and we eat." The questioner continued, "But sir, everyone sits, walks, and eats." And the Buddha told him, when we sit, we know we are sitting. When we walk, we know we are walking. When we eat, we know we are eating. In this time of pandemic in which we live, with limitations on movement and activities, may each of us be present at every moment, in every setting. May we be mindful in all we do. Even the most simple and essential act can be a Dharma door. Amen. Blessed be. Okay, there we go. even as you are separated and sitting in your own homes today. The Unitarian Church of Harrisburg is still a freely gathered church of free people. The church is created, sustained, and supported by you. The ministry continues even when the building is closed. In the space below the video screen, you will find directions on how to give an offering today in support of the Unitarian Church of Harrisburg and our community partner for the month of April. Each month we share half of the Sunday offering with a local nonprofit organization. Our partner this month is Community Checkup Center in Hall Manor. Community Checkup Center is a community-based nonprofit organization working to improve the health and wellness of low-income women and children. They do this through high-quality, compassionate care. Founded in 1994, this organization provides pediatric services for patients up to 21 years of age and gynecological and family planning services for women of all ages. Your financial commitment and support matter. Please be generous. Buddhism teaches that the best way to take care of the future is to take care of the present moment. Let us pause in silence in this present moment.
Please join me in singing Be Ye Lamps Unto Yourselves.
Be ye lamps unto yourselves, be
Thich Nhat Hanh writes, enlightenment is always there. Small enlightenment will bring great enlightenment. If you breathe in and are aware that you are alive, then you can touch the miracle of being alive. Then that is a kind of enlightenment. Stay safe this week. Take good care and be aware. Amen. Blessed be.